In the darkness of night, the deserted backroads of Texas present a scene that is not easy to describe. During the day, these roads seem completely ordinary, but as soon as the sun sets and night spreads, a silence takes over that sinks straight into the human heart. For miles, there is no town, no shop, no light, only the shadows of trees and the whisper of the wind. It is said that many terrifying and mysterious incidents have taken place on these very roads, stories that can chill one's soul. One such incident happened to a young man named David, who spent the most horrifying night of his life on these backroads. David was returning from a party with his friends. It was around 2 a.m. He was tired and wanted to get home quickly, so he decided to take a shortcut most people avoided. At first, the drive felt completely normal. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, a faint song played on the radio, and the cool night breeze kept him a little more awake. But the deeper he drove into the road, the more a strange heaviness began to surround him. Thick trees stood on either side, bending in such a way as if they wanted to swallow the road whole. Every few moments, the hoot of an owl or the rustling of some animal in the bushes made the atmosphere even heavier. That a few miles in, he suddenly spotted a car up ahead, parked right in the middle of the road. Its taillights were glowing, but there was no movement inside. David thought maybe someone's car had broken down, so he slowed down to see what was going on. But as he came closer, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The car was empty. The front seat was empty. The back seat was empty, like no one had ever been there at all. But the strangest part was that the keys were still in the ignition. The engine was off, but the taillights were still glowing. David was confused. If the driver had gotten out, where could they have gone? Who would walk into this deserted forest? He looked around, but saw nothing except darkness. Just then, a loud crashing sound came from behind him. His hands trembled as he whipped his head around, but there was nothing but darkness. No movement, no figure. Terrified, he turned back to face the road ahead, and his blood ran cold. The car that had been right in front of him only moments earlier had completely vanished, and no lights, no car, no trace, just an empty, lonely road under his headlights. David slammed the gas and drove as fast as he could, his heart pounding so violently it felt like it would burst. A few miles later, when he finally reached the highway and saw trucks and other cars, he took a deep breath of relief. But the image of that car haunted his mind. It had been there, clear as day, keys in the ignition, and then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. It couldn't have been just his imagination. Later, when David told others about what had happened, local people confirmed that a similar story was well known. Years ago, at that exact spot, a horrific accident had occurred in which a family burned alive inside their car. Since then, many claim a phantom car appears there, parked for a moment before disappearing without a trace. Some call it the phantom car, while others call it a cursed shadow. Whatever it was, for David, that night became unforgettable and terrifying. That a similar incident happened to a woman named Maria, a nurse. She was heading home after a double-night shift at the hospital. It was around 3 a.m, and she was exhausted. She too decided to take the shortcut. The back road was pitch black, the moon hidden behind clouds, and only the sound of the wind filled the air. She was driving slowly when suddenly she saw a woman standing on the side of the road. Dressed in white, with her hair loose, she stared blankly at the car. Maria slammed on the brakes, her heartbeat racing. She thought maybe someone was in trouble. But as her car approached, the woman gave a faint smile and vanished right before her eyes. Maria screamed. She immediately locked her windows and sped away. But the worst was yet to come. A few miles later, when she looked into her rearview mirror, her blood froze. On the back seat sat the same woman in white, her face pale, her eyes wide, her hair wild, and her hollow stare fixed on Maria. Panicked, Maria slammed the brakes, flung open the door, and ran into the darkness. There was no one around, only the forest and the sound of the wind. When she finally gathered the courage to look back, the car was empty. The woman had disappeared. The next day, Maria told her friends what had happened. Some laughed it off, but locals confirmed that many had seen the same woman on that road. They said she was the spirit of a bride who had died in a tragic accident there years ago. Since then, her ghost was said to wander the road, especially appearing to lone travelers. Even today, Maria refuses to drive that route. She insists it wasn't just an illusion or shadow, it was a real presence, one that left her with a lifelong fear of dark roads. Story 2: The string of terrifying incidents on Texas backroads never seems to end. One such event happened to a man named Johnson, a truck driver whose story is still well known among the locals. Johnson was a tough man, used to long overnight journeys. He had been driving trucks for years and was never afraid of strange noises or dark nights. But the night he speaks of shook his confidence to the core that he was driving along an old back road around 2:30 a.m. The road was completely deserted, and the trees on both sides seemed to whisper to each other in the darkness. To stay awake, he kept the radio playing soft music. Suddenly, he noticed a small child standing in the middle of the road. Johnson hit the brakes hard, shocked to see a child in such a lonely place. He turned on his high beams to get a better look. The boy stood with his head down, wearing a white shirt and shorts. Johnson opened the truck door, stepped out, and called out, "Son, what are you doing here all alone?" But the boy remained silent. Cautiously, Johnson walked closer. When he was just a few steps away, the boy suddenly raised his head and stared directly at him. His eyes were glowing red, like burning embers. Johnson stumbled backward, unable to steady his steps. And in the next instant, the boy dissolved into smoke and vanished into the air. Johnson's throat went dry. He rushed back to the truck, started the engine, and sped off. But as he glanced into the rearview mirror, his blood ran cold. The same boy stood behind the truck, red eyes glowing, slowly waving at him. Johnson didn't dare look back again. He pressed the gas and drove as fast as he could, not stopping until he reached the next town. The following day, when he shared the story with fellow drivers, they told him about a fatal accident that had occurred on that very road years earlier, claiming the life of a young boy. Locals believe his spirit still wanders there, often appearing to drivers late at night. Another chilling encounter happened to a college student named Henry. He was returning home from a friend's place late at night. The road was cloaked in darkness when he suddenly spotted a tall man standing by the roadside. The figure wore black clothing, a hat pulled low, and his face was hidden in shadow. Henry slowed his car, assuming it might be a hitchhiker looking for a ride. But as he got closer, the man suddenly stepped into the middle of the road. Henry slammed the brakes and swerved, barely managing to stop in time. The man stood motionless. Leaning out of the window, Henry asked, "Do you need a lift?" But there was no reply, only silence. A few moments later, the man slowly walked up to the driver's side window. Henry tried to see his face, but no matter how brightly the headlights shone, the man's face remained shrouded in darkness. It was as if the light had no effect on him at all. Henry's heart pounded. He rolled up the window and pressed the accelerator. But just as he moved forward, the man disappeared, vanishing instantly, leaving nothing but the empty road behind. Shaken, Henry made it home, but couldn't forget the encounter for days. Later, his research revealed that others had seen a similar figure in that area, a mysterious hat man who appears suddenly and then vanishes. Locals believe he is either a restless spirit or a demonic shadow that preys on late-night travelers. These two incidents are among the many infamous tales tied to Texas backroads. Those who travel them at night know these are no ordinary roads. They carry an aura of fear and mystery that can rattle even the strongest souls. Sometimes it's the red-eyed child, other times the shadowy hat man. But one thing is certain: driving alone on these roads at night is not for the faint of heart. Story 3: Another terrifying tale is told about the lonely backroads of Texas, one that chills the soul just to hear. This incident happened to a young woman named Lisa, who was returning from her cousin's house. It was around midnight, and she was driving alone in her small car. The road was completely empty, the forest stretched on both sides, and clouds covered the sky above. As Lisa drove along listening to the radio, the music suddenly turned into strange static. She tried changing the station, but every channel was just noise. She switched the radio off, But in the heavy silence that followed, she realized she could hear footsteps outside. It made no sense. She was driving at high speed. Yet the sound was clear, as if someone was running right alongside her car. Terrified, she pressed harder on the gas, but the footsteps grew faster too. When she glanced out the window, her heart leapt in her throat. A shadowy figure was running beside her car. No clear shape, just a dark, shrouded form keeping pace with her. Lisa tried to scream, but no sound escaped her throat. Moments later, the shadow suddenly appeared in front of her car. Lisa slammed the brakes, swerving violently, barely managing to stop. Through the windshield, she saw a tall, human-like figure, thin, towering, its eyes glowing like burning embers. Lisa shut her eyes, restarted the car, and floored the accelerator. The vehicle passed straight through the figure, and when she looked back, nothing was there. Lisa reached home in tears and was bedridden with fever for days. Later, locals told her that the area was known for a legend about the running demon, a creature said to chase cars at night before vanishing into thin air. Another terrifying experience happened to a young couple out for a Saturday night drive. They had planned to spend some quiet time away from the city's noise. Around 1 a.m., they found themselves on a deserted back road. At first, everything seemed fine, until the girl noticed an old truck following them. At first, they thought it was just another vehicle, but soon the truck's behavior became strange. Sometimes it drove dangerously close, then it would fall back. Sometimes its headlights flashed on and off. The couple grew nervous. The boy sped up, but the truck matched his speed every time. Then, suddenly, the truck disappeared. Relieved, they assumed it had taken another route. But minutes later, in the rearview mirror, the same truck reappeared, closer than before. The girl began praying aloud, while the boy drove as fast as he could. No matter how much he accelerated, the truck clung to them. Finally, they reached the edge of a small town, where shops and streetlights began to appear. The moment light filled the road, the truck vanished completely. No sound, no trace, just empty highway. Shaken, they pulled into a gas station. An elderly man there noticed their pale faces and asked what had happened. When they told him, the man shook his head and said, "Children, you're lucky to have made it back alive." Years ago, a crazed truck driver ran over several people on that very road. The police chased him, but he died in a fiery crash. Ever since, people say his spirit still haunts these roads, chasing cars in the dead of night. The couple was horrified. They realized the truck that had chased them wasn't ordinary at all. It was the restless spirit of the mad driver. After that night, they never again traveled those roads after dark. These deserted Texas roads are far from ordinary. They carry stories that unsettle the mind and rattle the heart. Sometimes a shadow runs alongside your car. Sometimes an old truck stalks you. Sometimes the radio erupts with static as if an unseen force is trying to reach out. Those who have driven these roads know. Their silence is not true silence. It's a net of fear waiting to ensnare anyone who dares to pass. Story 4. On the desolate backroads of Texas, there's a tale so chilling that it makes anyone's skin crawl just hearing it. This incident happened to a family returning from vacation. In their car were a husband, wife, and their 2 children. Around 1:30 a.m., they were driving down an isolated stretch of road. The children were asleep in the back seat, while the couple talked quietly, eager to finally get home. Everything seemed normal until suddenly the wife said, "Did you see that?" Someone was standing by the side of the road. The husband quickly looked to the left, but saw nothing. He told her she must be imagining things, but the wife insisted she had seen a woman standing right at the roadside. Minutes later, a woman suddenly appeared in front of them. She stood in the middle of the road, her hair disheveled, her face hidden in shadow, wearing what looked like decades-old clothing. The husband slammed the brakes, the car screeched to a halt, and the children woke up startled. Slowly, the woman lifted her head and stared directly at their car. The husband switched on the high beams, but shockingly, the light passed straight through the woman's body as if she were made of smoke. The wife screamed, "She's not human!" And in that instant, the woman vanished. The children began crying. The husband started the car again, and they sped forward in fear. But the nightmare was not over. A few miles later, the inside of the car suddenly turned freezing cold. The air conditioner was off, yet it felt as though icy wind had filled the cabin. The wife turned to check on the children, and her throat went dry. Sitting between them was a third figure, a shadowy form with a blurred face, its eyes pitch black like empty, lifeless holes. The wife let out a scream. The husband slammed the brakes again, yanked the doors open, and rushed everyone outside. Shaking with terror in the darkness, they peered back into the car, only to find the back seat completely empty. The children, however, kept insisting, "Mom, someone was sitting there. He was looking at us." The family somehow made it to the nearest town. When they recounted what had happened, the locals shook their heads knowingly. They said the area was cursed, that years ago, an entire family had been killed in a tragic accident there. Many believed their spirits still haunted those roads, sometimes even climbing into passing cars. Another terrifying event occurred in the same region to a man named Robert. He was traveling alone one night. The road was utterly deserted, with not a single light in sight. After driving for some time, he suddenly noticed an old carriage appear in front of him, like a horse-drawn wagon from another century. It made no sense. How could something like that be on a modern highway? Robert slowed down to take a closer look. Inside the carriage sat two figures, both wearing old-fashioned clothing, as though they had stepped straight out of a century-old photograph. Their faces were completely expressionless, their eyes devoid of any life. Robert blinked in disbelief, but the scene was real. Seconds later, the entire carriage dissolved into mist and vanished. Robert floored the gas pedal, desperate to leave the place behind. Later, when he told a local old man about what he had seen, the man nodded gravely. He explained that the carriage was tied to a story from 100 years ago. A newlywed couple had been traveling home in such a carriage when they were ambushed by bandits and killed. Since then, people say their restless souls still wander the roads in that ghostly wagon. These stories may sound like old legends, but to those who have seen them with their own eyes, they are terrifying truth. The backroads of Texas are not just lonely stretches of asphalt. They are like an open graveyard, with every bend hiding a new horror. Anyone who travels them soon realizes these roads are never truly empty. Story 5 among all the tales told about the lonely backroads of Texas. The most famous and terrifying is that of a police officer who saw something with his own eyes that defies belief. The officer's name was Daniel, and he had been with the highway patrol for many years. He was used to working night shifts and had witnessed every kind of accident, robbery, and dangerous situation imaginable. But one night, something happened that changed his life forever. It was past midnight when Daniel drove his patrol car down an isolated back road where illegal street races were often reported. The road was empty. Apart from his headlights cutting through the darkness, there was no other source of light. He was driving calmly when suddenly he saw a small child standing right in the middle of the road. Daniel slammed the brakes, stopping the car just inches away. He jumped out and switched on his flashlight. The child looked about 6 or 7 years old, head bowed, hair messy, clothes torn and old. Daniel stepped closer and gently asked, "Son, what are you doing out here all alone?" The child didn't raise his head. Daniel reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, and in the next instant his soul froze. The boy suddenly looked up. His eyes were completely hollow, nothing inside them but black voids. Sweat poured down Daniel's face. Then, in a deep, unnatural voice, the child said, "This is my road. Why are you here?" Daniel staggered back in fear. Before he could react, the child vanished into thin air. Only the sound of the wind remained. Panicked, he turned to get back into his patrol car, but what he saw made his blood run cold. Sitting in the back seat was the same child, staring at him with a horrifying grin. Muttering prayers, Daniel started the car and sped away as fast as he could. For miles, he felt certain the boy was still sitting there. When he finally reached the town and stopped under the safety of streetlights, he turned around to find the back seat empty. But on the seat were small, wet footprints, proof that something had been there. When Daniel shared the story with his fellow officers, most of them laughed it off. But some of the older officers grew serious. They told him that the legend of the Dark Child was well known in that area. Years ago, a child had died in a tragic accident on that very road, and it was said that his spirit still roamed there on that same stretch of road. Another horrifying event happened to a truck driver. He was hauling goods late at night when he saw a woman waving on the roadside. Thinking she needed a ride, he stopped and let her in. She climbed into the seat and said softly, "I need to go home." The driver asked her where, but she didn't respond. A while later, he glanced into the rearview mirror and nearly screamed. The woman's face had changed. She was now a skeleton, hollow sockets where her eyes should have been, her face twisted into a dreadful smile. The driver slammed the brakes, but when he turned around, the back seat was empty. He later admitted that for days afterward, he was haunted by nightmares. He swore that the woman was real, not a hallucination. Locals still say that she is the hitchhiker ghost, a spirit that hails rides from unsuspecting drivers, only to vanish into nothing. And one knows how many such stories are buried along the Texas backroads. Sometimes it's the spirit of a child, sometimes a woman asking for a lift, sometimes an old-fashioned carriage appearing out of nowhere. But one thing is always the same. These roads are not ordinary. Anyone who travels them eventually returns with a chilling experience. Some say these are only legends and illusions. But for those who have seen them with their own eyes, they are undeniable truths. They know that when you drive alone on a Texas back road in the dead of night, you are never truly alone. Someone or something is always with you, whether you can see it or not.